knew there were things there that Maddox had no idea existed. God is the very same. God's perspective is much higher than ours. God can see things that are coming that we don't even know exist. That doesn't mean God is doing it. And I think we have to be very careful to make that distinction. But God knows things are coming, and God can make sure that things are worked to our advantage. I want to, his story inspires me because it resonates so much with my own story. Here's just some thoughts from my own life for you regarding perspective. This past year has it has definitely been the most difficult year of my life. For those of you who know me, you know somewhat of what we've been through, but for those who don't, last August, I was diagnosed with a very rare and very aggressive form of cancer that was literally choking me to death. It was right in my throat. I couldn't eat. I was having trouble breathing. It was a very, very difficult time. And before we knew it was cancer, I remember lying in bed. I'd had it checked out, this weird little lump, and my doctor said that it was nothing, big. It was a goiter, and he was wrong. Let's put it that way. I remember lying in bed thinking this should have stopped growing. This shouldn't be there. And God, am I going to look like a freak having this giant lump on my throat? And I remember the Holy Spirit distinctly saying to me, Brian, don't worry about it. Now, on this side of what we've been through, I understand that when God says don't worry about it, that does not mean nothing's going to happen. That does not mean it might be painful and difficult. And that does not mean that everything's okay in a sense. It literally meant don't worry about it. I've got it under control. It will end up all right, but it might be difficult. It's not the same as I thought. Now I have a new perspective on what God was trying to say to me. Going through that, there were times that I felt like I was betrayed, like Joseph was. I felt like my own body, the thing that was giving me life, was now feeding its own death. And I felt like I was being betrayed by my own body. I felt like I was imprisoned. I spent over 40 days in the hospital. And every time in a room by myself because I couldn't be around other people for fear of infections that my body couldn't handle. Facing the pressure of death, I felt like sometimes I was a prisoner to it. It was a battle, a mental and a physical battle. It was terrible. Also, I felt like I was a prisoner to the fact that I couldn't take care of my own family at that time. It was just very, very difficult. Then I felt like I was a slave to my compromised immune system because I couldn't be around other people, and if I didn't take Purell hand sanitizer and a face mask, I wasn't going to be okay, and I needed to have these things in order to be all right. Other times I felt like I was a slave to chemotherapy, or I was a slave to the mind games that you have to deal with when you're facing a life-threatening disease or situation. Oftentimes, God was constant every step of the way. But still, oftentimes I felt like I was lost and I was helpless. It was very painful. It was very isolating. It was very lonely. Intensely lonely. I've never experienced anything like that again. And God willing, I never will. But, I think the unsung heroes and kind of the unsung forgotten victims of stuff like this are the families of people who go through these things. Because everyone prays for you because you're dealing with the disease. But a lot of people forget that, I had a pregnant wife who we found out the day before I was diagnosed with cancer, we saw the baby for the first time. I keep this picture in my Bible. On August 16th, we saw Zoe on the sonogram for the first time and could see that everything was going well for her. We saw life. On August 17th, we saw death in our family, one day apart. And my wife had to go through, I couldn't imagine if it was her, but she had to go through the fact that she might have to raise that baby by herself. She had to go through the fact that her husband might not make it. We spent so much time apart. Every night I lied there by myself. The only people to keep me company were nurses who are they're great people, but they're not the people you want to hang out with when they're injecting drugs into your body. I didn't see my son very much at all those 41 days because he was sick, or I was prone to being sick, or I had tubes coming out of everywhere and he couldn't be around the chemicals. It's one of the hardest things I've ever faced in my life, to see my favorite person in the world, talk to him on the phone, and that was it. For over a month, over 3 months, it seemed like 41 days. The pressure that they had to face of what's going to happen to my daddy, what's going to happen to my husband, what are we going to do? There was intense pressure that they felt too. My heart breaks more for their pressure than what I had to go through. It affected our home life. When I wasn't at home, They stayed with family and friends. That's not their house. It's comfortable, but it's not their home. And I mean, it was painful. It was painful. We have great family who'd help take care of us, but it's still not like being at home and being okay. You know, and before that, just another thought on perspective. Andrea and I had a dream. Ever since before we got married, we wanted to have 2 kids, boy and a girl, 2 years apart. A year ago, January, we found out Andrea was pregnant, and we were psyched. And just about a week or 2 later, she suffered a miscarriage. And we could have chosen to be mad, to give up, to be angry, you know. But we felt like God was going to work it out in the end. And then, like I said, August 16th, found out that our daughter was coming, that we had been given life. It was a huge blessing. And the next day, found out that I was potentially dying. And, you know, we realized at one point, if that first baby had gone to term, my wife that baby would have been born right in the middle of my chemotherapy treatments. I wouldn't have been there for the first 3 months at all. My wife would have been forced to raise an 18-month-old, very adventurous child and a newborn baby all at the same time with no help whatsoever from me. I mean, when I was at home, I was useless. I was weak. I was sick. I was afraid of catching something. I mean, literally, it was a very hard time. I wanted to be there, but I couldn't physically. We look back now and see God didn't take that first baby, but God knew what was going to happen, and God provided life just at the right time. That's why we named our daughter Zoe, because in Greek it means life, referring to the life that God gives. God brought us that girl. That's the perspective that we've chosen. When I got out of the hospital, I had a choice to make. Which perspective was I going to catch? Would I catch God's perspective, or just any other perspective out there that said that I was a victim, that things shouldn't have happened? You know, I could have gone around asking the question, God, why did this happen? Why did you let this happen? But I never did. I felt like it was irrelevant because it was already happening. The question became, because of the perspective God gave me, why did God save me from death? Why did this happen? How could you do this? To why did you let me live? Why did you let me live? Completely different perspectives. From catching God's perspectives, I can see now that it has made us stronger. We're people who appreciate life a whole lot more now. And I can see how God has led us through a painful, dark situation to experience joy and freedom and love and hope. And that's what God wants to do in every single one of us here. God has good things for us. It all depends on what we're going to choose to look at. Joseph chose the same thing. He could see that God never abandoned him. He never punished him. He wasn't being cruel to him. Instead, he set out on an adventure that led to the salvation of many thousands of people. Which perspective are you catching for your life situations? There are so many available. Every person has a different perspective on what's going on in your life. But there's really only one that counts. Are you looking for God's fingerprints amid your chaos? I wish I had time to tell you all the miracles God did throughout that story. I kind of focused on the hard parts because that was what we were up against. That's the truth. But God did so many miraculous things. Had I not been looking for it, we would never have seen them, though. And not like there's anything special about me. There was a lot of people around us praying for us. A lot of people there who wanted to see us well. But if we didn't look for it, we would never have seen it. I want to encourage you, catch God's perspective. Find out what God is working through your life. I'll be honest, that was the worst situation ever. I would never wish that on a single person, even people I don't like very much, who might get on my bad side later. I would never wish what we went through on any person ever. But I'm glad that I went through it now. I'm glad because there's things I've learned about life and about God that I wouldn't know had God not allowed me to go through that. Joseph was an everyday teenager, like all of us were at some point, with dreams and gifts and a future, and then life hit him. But he acted heroically through embracing purity, through cultivating perseverance, and through catching God's perspective. Joseph was able to act like this because he was loyal to God. And through his life story, we can see that God was loyal to Joseph and richly and significantly rewarded him for that. I'd like to pray for you. Will you bow your heads and close your eyes?